Hi, you guys out there in Humanities 146. Here I am with a completely optional edition of a little lecture that I would have loved to share with you in class, but it's not essential for your mythology class. So I'm going to talk about Iran. And as I just said, optional, optional. So if you're pressed for time, then just turn it off. But if you're sitting home and you're locked up and it's boring, then maybe stay with me for a little excursion to Iran. So here you can read the details, but this is Iran in numbers. I traveled there in, about 7 or 8 years ago. And just look at the vast, vast country. It's 11 times as big as Michigan, or you can put all these European countries all together. It has a population of 81 million. That's not so dense. And it is full of surprises, especially if you compare with what you hear from the news, right? What do we usually know? What do we usually hear about Iran? Well, it all starts with the Iranian Revolution of 1979. That is when the Shah took over, and oops, I'm sorry, not the Shah. That's when the current not even the current, what am I saying? That's when the Ayatollah Khomeini took over and ousted the Shah. Now, the Shah was a friend of the West and had modernized Iran, but the Ayatollah brought back a very fundamentalist and strict understanding of Islam. Now, what happened in the same year, 1979, is that, I forgot how many, but I think 53 students or something like that from the university stormed the American embassy and held dozens of American diplomats hostage for 444 days. There was nothing but death to America and hatred. Finally, the hostages were released, but the relationships between Iran and the US were never the same. If you look at demonstrations, this is what you see on the news, right? Down with the USA, down with Israel, stuff like that. Now, in more recent times, Obama tried to thaw the relations between the two countries. Trump has tightened the knots again, and so right now most people are very afraid that Iran will develop nuclear weapons, and then, God be with us all. Now, Khomeini, who ousted the Shah, is gone, but the current leader, Ayatollah again, his name is Khamenei. Sounds just about the same, doesn't it? But there he is in a picture. And so, yeah, maybe if you know nothing about Iran, this is a good time to Google a little bit. But I saw the other Iran. I saw the Iran that you hear very little about in the news. Here is, for example, the central square of the capital, and the capital of Tehran, right? A little smoggy there, but you see, it looks at first glance like a perfectly fine country. Lots of cars. There's political propaganda, but more like Russia or China. I had the real big fortune to travel in Iran by myself without any minders, without any watchdogs for about 2 months. And I'm just giving you a little picture overview here of just the variety of nature, of sites, of deserts, of Swiss Alps practically here, of areas with water, of areas that are hot, of areas that are very cold and dry. Look at this. This almost looks like Monument Valley here in Arizona, doesn't it? It was absolutely stunning. And then up near the Caspian Sea, you have tea plantations like this. And I visited a beautiful family where a young guy, I had found him online. Don't get me wrong here. No, but he wanted to learn English. And so since I was interested in Iran, I took a chance and I met him, and he introduced me to his family, which was absolutely wonderful. In some parts of the country, it looks like this, where they have oil refineries, but then you go into the markets, and to me, this was much more impressive. It's almost like you're catapulted 100, 200, 500 years back. You see these antiquities, and you see all this old stuff that comes from the countryside, and you can visit artisans and markets, and you see people doing embroidery that is old, or bookbinding, or look, even rope making. For me, the most interesting, of course, were all the things that had to do with the arts, like block printing. It's almost like a kind of not tie-dye, but yeah, it's block printing. So it's actually a trade that we also have in Germany. Old traditions. And who hasn't heard of Persian rugs, the finest rugs in the world, sometimes made out of pure silk, absolutely to die for. And then this guy was a master in miniature paintings, and I bought some paintings from him. Again, this goes back to Persian miniature paintings that is 500-600 years old. And since it is an Islamic country now, you will see all these beautiful minarets. The one in the center is the oldest, probably goes back to the 11th century. And left and right, you have mosques that are probably just about 20, 30, 40 years old. You go to the markets, and the markets or the bazaars have architecture again that is just so amazing. Look at these almost stalagmite, stalactite, honeycomb kind of ceilings here that you find in some of the markets. And I saw some of the old mud brick towns, literally just like you see on the left, still made of mud brick or adobe towns. And this beautiful woman in her chador, which is the required dress for females. But also in some parts of the country, you see that Iran expanded at some point. This is very close to Armenia, and so there is a UNESCO site in Armenian church right now, which is on Iranian territory. And here you see how ancient this is. This is from 1250 BC. Those are ancient ziggurats. I believe that I already showed you some of those in class when we talked about Mesopotamia. And look at this beautiful, beautiful brick here with the cuneiform inscriptions. So, but also just marvels of engineering. This is a Achaemenid, again, that's ancient, hydraulic system, which is still functioning. This is sort of like comparable to maybe the Roman aqueducts, and it's about from that time, but very, very different engineering approach. One site that maybe you have heard of is Persepolis, or Takht-e-Jamshid, as the Persians would say, and it is one of the most impressive ancient Persian capitals. Now, just like what is New Year's for us, or July 4th, the biggest festival in Persia is Nowruz, which is a pre-Islamic festival, which just would have happened for the beginning of spring. Everybody is out there, and of course I happen to be at Persepolis during Nowruz. Now look at this, millions of people visiting. I would have preferred a much more lonely experience. But Nowruz is celebrating the equinox. Haft Sin, Haft is the number 7 in Persian, means 7 items, all starting with S, like sabzi. Sabzi are sprouts or greens, and all these other ones here, right? Seeb is an apple, are arranged around a table, and this is all pre-Islamic folk tradition. But also now in the merging with Islam, you have the Quran in the center of it all. You have candles lit, and every household, every restaurant has a table like this. Now, as a woman, I have to say, traveling in Iran was somewhat challenging because there are definitely different measuring sticks for men and women. Men can do just about anything, and women have to dress very conservatively and are under a lot of restrictions. In many ways, I had the best of both worlds, but then not quite. What was interesting is that there were signs everywhere that you should wear helmets when you drove a motorcycle. And there were signs everywhere that you should wear a chador if you go out of the house. Now, the minute you would dare go out of the house without your proper dress, the police would stop you. But I saw over 50% of all men riding their bikes without helmets, and guess what? Nobody stopped them. So here's just my absolute highlight of the trip. Out of 2 months and only 15 minutes to go, I can't tell you everything. But this is a 3,000-year-old troglodyte city called Maymand. In Maymand, do you see these caves here? There were over 450 dwellings. This was a village where people lived, of shepherds and farmers and craftsmen. Today there are maybe only 40 of them still occupied, and there are a few that are rented out to visitors. Well, I arrived there pretty much by hitchhiking because it was so remote, and here's my little dwelling. I rented this cave, and wouldn't you believe it, this was just the weekend of Easter. I literally woke up on Easter Sunday in a cave, just like biblical. I mean, biblical. This was a guy who wanted to show me around everywhere, and first I was just all fine with this, but then I realized that he was just really getting a lot too close for anybody's comfort. And here are his parents, who actually had rented this wonderful little cave to me, and they just deported him to some aunts out of the village for as long as the American woman was in town, because unfortunately the idea of Iranian men is sort of that all Western women are pretty much sluts, no matter whether they are 50 or 60 years old, or they are professors or their grandmothers, doesn't matter. So I was grateful for him being banished for a while. So here's my little bed, and as I can tell you, only when you left the house could you actually take this lock and lock up. When you were in the cave, there was no lock, because who would lock their house? Everybody trusted everybody, except I wouldn't have trusted this guy very much, to be honest. Okay. Iran was a country of opposites. Everything we know about Iran is sort of true to an extent. It's a police state, but also look at this guy, right? So he sees an American woman and he makes a big peace sign for me. Or this, right? There's Khomeini, there's Khamenei, there's political and religious propaganda, and then look at this guy. Look at this absolutely hilarious t-shirt. When I asked him about if he wasn't afraid being arrested, he said, "Oh, the police doesn't know English." So that was just super cool. Or I saw the most beautiful art, Islamic art, mosques, but I also saw pre-Islamic art, which was deliberately chopped and destroyed, as you see here in this picture. I saw women wearing the very traditional outfits, and I saw women who would push the traditions as far as they could, put on lipstick and makeup and show their hair and wear colors that were outlandish, pretty much waiting for the fashion police to arrest them. And believe me, there is a fashion police, and yes, they will be arrested. But they thought it was sort of like quite fashionable that at least in your life as a teenager, you should be arrested 2 or 3 times just for, to fit in. There was Zoroastrianism, and you've just learned in my last little lecture about Zoroastrian towers of silence and their minarets. Zoroastrians have been driven out and pretty much driven to extinction in Iran because of Islam, and today there are so few Zoroastrians that they now are finally accepted. Overall, I have to say, Iran was one of the most fun countries I've ever traveled. I have had wild experiences. I had total strangers jumping up, hugging me, putting their arm around me, like this guy down here, and you can see me slightly leaning to the side because this is not appropriate to put your hands around a woman you're not married to. I had people inviting me for tea everywhere. Everybody was happy to see me. People thanked me for coming to a country. And took my pictures over and over and over. And so I have no idea how many people took my pictures. One guy shoved his baby into my arm just so I would, he could take a picture with his baby in my hands. I was also insulted a few times in Persian, so I don't know quite what they were saying, but they weren't saying anything nice because I was considered an American there, or as I tried hard to tell everybody, I was really a German, because Germans can travel freely. Americans need a guide, and the guide would have cost me $100 and a lot of freedom of movement. So I hope you enjoyed the little trip to Iran. Ask me, give me feedback, ask me questions, whatever you like. Stay healthy, stay safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye.